Well, hello and good morning. Welcome to another Sunday morning coffee with Dr. Childress. So today I have just finished up with the California Board of Psychology hearing, and so this is the first Sunday after that. So I'm a little drained and a little tired, and my life is transitioning no matter what happens with the California Board. My life is transitioning. But I wanted to tell you about what happened. So this video or this Facebook Live, YouTube, is about the California Board of Psychology and my discharge of my duties, discharge of duty to protect and discharge of standard 1.05. So that's all done. Yay. So let's talk about that. So let's first talk about documentation because that's what clinical psychologists do. That's what I did. And so it's all documented into the record. Um, and that's both the Egyptian god of documentation or writing and stuff. And that's I've done it. It's all in the uh, it's all in the exhibits and testimony. And that was my biggest concern going into this is the state was trying to limit it just to those Facebook posts where I was very critical of Burnett and Larandos. But this is a larger scope. And standard 2.05 or 1.05 talks about taking action appropriate to the situation. Well, what's the situation? And I got to give props to the administrative law judge. It hasn't been decided yet. That's still coming back, and I don't want to mess with anything anywhere. But he was very good. He was very tolerant of my procedural missteps and the fact that I was a psychologist. And I think he got it. I think he understood because he admitted all of my exhibits. And that was just amazing to me. That's exactly what I wanted. And I was fighting to get them all in. And even some ones I didn't present in my testimony, he admitted those. And so now everything's documented into the record. Yay. So yeah, so he was pretty fantastic. And so independent of what direction it goes, my life is going a particular direction anyway. But that was I got to give props to the administrative law judge on this. He was excellent. So first off, just to talk about what documentation has gone in. This is relative to my 1.04, 1.04 and 1.05 obligations to take further action appropriate to the situation. And then 1.05, we'll look at it in a second, says National Committee on Professional Ethics, licensing boards, and institutional authority. Well, the APA Ethics Committee, I documented them. I've told them about the issues in 2018 petition to the APA, that's Exhibit 15. And then in 2025, the 6 AFCC instructors, I notified the APA committee about them. Check. And that's now I wasn't sure whether or not the administrative law judge would admit the 2025 activities with rounding the instructors, but he did, and so it's in the record. The notification to the APA Ethics Committee. Now, for the appropriate institutional authority, that's the AFCC, Association of Family and Conciliation Courts. And so in 2017, I have some slides I presented at their national convention. That's Exhibit 14. And then in 2025, I wrote about the 6 instructors, and that's Exhibit 19. So I've documented to both the APA Ethics Committee and the AFCC. I've notified them twice on 1.05. And the licensing boards is 2025 because that's the hearing Burnett and Larandos complaint. And so all the hearing exhibits are notifying the licensing board. And let me just say a little bit of something about that. Because the licensing boards are closed from the front door, they don't review custody evaluations, and who's supposed to enforce ethical standards for competence? The licensing boards. Well, if there's rampant incompetence, guess who's responsible? And so that we'll talk about that in a second. Regulatory capture. So that's the situation. But I found, or I was given, a backdoor where I had their full attention, the licensing boards, for 3 days. And so I have dropped the documentation right in, mainlining into the licensing boards. So I'm good to go with that. So let's take a look at the uh, reporting reporting ethical violation, standard 1.05. And let me just say again, ethical codes are mandatory. They're not optional. So this is mandatory for me. I don't have a choice um, on any of this. So what does it tell me to do? So if an apparent ethical violation has substantially harmed or is likely to substantially harm a person or organization and is not appropriate for informal resolution under 1.04, that's it. I mean, there's substantial harm in the family courts and it's going to continue. So that's mad. Um, or is not resolved properly under 1.04 informal notification, psychologists take further action appropriate to the situation. Now, let me bring this up again because that's a command statement. It's not saying I may take further action or I can consider further. It's saying psychologists take further action. That means I got to do something. And so what do I got to do? Well, then the next sentence tells me such action might include referral to state or national committee on professional ethics, to state licensing boards, or to the appropriate institutional authority. So you can see that. Check, check, check. That's what I've done. Um, and so you'll see the referral to the National Committee on Professional Ethics. That's the APA Ethics Committee. I did that on 2017 and in 2025. Appropriate institutional authority, AFCC Convention 2017, Board of Directors in 2025, state licensing boards, California Board of Psychology, and the Burnett and Lorandos exhibits and testimony in 2025. Plus, I've got 6 licensing board complaints against top instructors. And I can do that forever because the forensic custody evaluators are in violation of 2.01 boundaries of competence. Look at their vita, no attachment, no delusional disorder. That triggers 1.04, and then I'm into 1.05, and that's with the instructors, and we'll talk about that in a second. So that's not going away either. So check, check, check. I'm all done on 1.04. Now, you may not realize that because you are currently in the courts and back in the day, 2017, 2018, everybody's still fighting for their families and stuff. But now in retrospect, you can see what I've been doing. I've been documenting in the paper trail. Why? Because the situation in the family courts has to do with regulatory capture, institutional capture. And so the institutions are an institutional betrayal trauma. So they're not responding to you. And I know that. So standard 1.05 are discharged to the 3. Check, check, check. All done. Now, the other one is my clinical duty to protect from abuse. And my clinical duty to protect was active for 2 abuse pathologies: child abuse that's undiagnosed and untreated, DSM-5 diagnoses, and spousal abuse of the targeted parent using the child as a weapon. 2 abuse pathologies. So let me talk about the differences for a second. The abuse pathologies trigger a duty to protect. I've got a duty to protect the children and the parents, and then I have to discharge that duty to an appropriate protective resource. For children, it might be Child Protective Services or something like that. In this case, the protective resource is the state licensing boards. It's not the APA, although they might be considered protective, not so much. Not the AFCC, they're a professional organization. So the discharge of the duty to protect is really to the licensing boards in this case. But that's where I couldn't get in. I was telling parents to file licensing board complaints, but they refused to hear them for quasi-judicial immunity and release of information reasons. So they just bounce them right back out again. So the forensic custody evaluations have never, ever been reviewed by the licensing boards. So those are the two abused. Well, I have now discharged my duty to protect to a protective organization or an agency, California Board of Psychology, through my testimony and exhibits from the 29th through the 31st. And approaching this, the state twice came up with, or actually 3 times, I think, came up with settlement proposals. And they were saying, well, reduce your charges. And all 3 times I said, no, you need to end forensic custody evaluations. You need to get competent treatment in. So we are just on entirely different zones. And in my last formal settlement offer, I've said basically, if you continue on with this into the hearing, I'm going to consider that you have not received my duty to protect. So therefore, I still carry it, and my obligation is to discharge it then through the hearing and subsequent actions. I feel I've discharged it through the hearing, but there will be subsequent actions with state legislators and class action. We'll maybe talk about that in a second. So I'm done. Okay, I'm done in the family. I've been in the family courts for 15 years. And if you look at my vita, I didn't start here. There's nothing in me that says I want to be in the family courts. There's no clinical psychologist alive who wants to be in the family courts. But this is child abuse. This is spousal abuse, duty to protect, ethical violations. I got obligations. And I'm an expert in the domains. I'm an expert in attachment and trauma and IRBs and just a whole range, factitious disorders. And so if I didn't stay, then nobody's going to stay. No, this is never going to get solved. So I had special obligations because of my expertise to stay. So I did. But I knew it was going to take me at least a decade, and I lost a couple of years on COVID. But now, 15 years later, I finally completed the arc that I'm in, and so now I'm done. So I can now leave the family courts. No, I'm not going to leave you folks. Don't worry, I'm hanging around, but I'll describe more about what's involved with that there. So just first off, for all of you parents, it's in your ballpark now because you are the issue is institutional and regulatory capture. That's by Stigler, Stigler. Excuse me. And so it's up to you because right now you're in a situation you cannot get competent mental health services. Fact. You cannot get a diagnosis for the problem. Fact. And the problem is child abuse. Oh my goodness. So a delusional disorder, major psychiatric disorder, factitious disorder imposed on another, major psychiatric disorder. So we've got major psychiatric disorders that involve child abuse and spousal abuse, and you can't get a diagnosis for that or even assessment. That's so bad, but it's up to you, okay? Because I've done everything I can. I put my license on the line, got it all documented in here. It's now up to you to go to your state legislators and to go to get a class action lawsuit. Okay, that's a you thing. And until you do that, you're going to be in a system that doesn't respond to you. The moment you do that, you solve it for all children everywhere. So I'm going to be focused going forward mostly on the legislative side of things. And I'll talk probably next week about where we will be going with that. So just, Suze Remus, if you're listening, just a shout out to you. You were early. That's your problem. No, okay, now I'm here. Now we'll go into the legislators, but you were just early on the situation, and that's why you kept running into walls, regulatory capture. So that's what we're going to be doing here. So this is your documentation for both of those, for the state legislators and for any class action you guys want to come up with here relative to this. I've given you all the documentation. I'm a whistleblower. And so you can go to my website. It's California Board of Psychology documents. It's going to start with my brief, a 15-page brief, 12-page brief that I gave to the administrative law judge, and then all of my exhibits. Okay, all 33 of them, they were all admitted, so there they all are, and you can go down and look at them. Now, some of the key exhibits that I'm going to call your attention to is 3 right off the top. That's the regulatory capture and institutional betrayal. That's important. That's the situation. That's what you take into your legislators. That's what you take into the media. That's what you take into your class action, is the regulatory capture, institutional betrayal trauma. That's Stigler and Freud, Freyd. I'll be writing about this in journal articles coming forward, ethics journals and everywhere. So this is the route I'm taking in my journal publications. I'll even submit one to the AFCC about regulatory capture and institutional betrayal trauma to their journal, Family Court Review. But in addition, that's just quotes and gives you a little direction, describes it. But the real 2 powerhouses on this are the Claude exhibits. So Claude Exhibit 22 is about the harm of parental alienation syndrome. So that's targeting Burnett and Larandos specifically and their little cadre of experts. And then 23, though, is the one you want to kind of look at. And that's a Claude analysis. It's the same chat dialogue, the same prompt response log. There's 3 parts to it. These are the last 2 parts. But I separated them out based on sort of content. And so the Claude analysis, that Exhibit 23, I start by talking about class action. I said, Claude, you're an AI. I'm a psychologist. We're not attorneys. But hey, where I'm sitting, I'm looking at a class action potentiality. And Claude says, yeah, it kind of makes sense. Here's all the issues involved. And so Claude discusses that. Then, though, I go into and say, but it's not really the class action that I want or that I think is good. We got now adult children and their parents who've lost their kids across 40 years. Oh, my goodness. And all these children. And those are the victims of institutional betrayal trauma. Trauma. And so we got to get back out to them and help them recover. We got to get resources, mental health resources to them. And I figure that will come off of the settlement. So if you get a class action lawsuit with 50 state licensing boards, all 50 state licensing boards, the American Psychological Association, and the AFCC, as well as the individual forensic evaluators and their malpractice, there's what's called your deep pockets. Okay, there's your money that will get the attorneys interested because they'll settle out and then get a big settlement, and they'll take their whatever money they get and distribute the rest, among all these people. So who knows what? I'm not worried about that. What I'm worried about is enough money to interest the attorneys. But on the settlement would involve the APA and the licensing boards tossing money and resources into training the psychologists in the family courts. We need to remediate the training or the quality that the courts are receiving, the quality of mental health services, so that's got to get resources in. The the APA can sort of target that and promote that and say, we want psychologists in the family courts. We'll give you all sorts of training and support. But in addition, the state legislators, because the licensing boards can fund some research, like a pilot program kind of stuff, and fund this. In addition, though, the funding has to go for the now adult survivors, the children who are now adults, and recovering them, helping them navigate what they went through, as well as the parents who lost kids over the course of decades, and now they're in traumatic grief. And so we got to get back out to them. That's the institutional betrayal trauma. And what Freud talks about with that is the solution is called institutional courage, where the institutions step up and say, yep, we did bad. It's not you. What we say, I'm a child abuse guy. What we say to a kid when we rescue them from child abuse, first thing we say, it's not your fault. You did nothing wrong. Bad people did bad things to you. We're going to make them stop. And that's what the institutions need to say to the now adult children and to the parents that went through all of this for 40 years is it's not your fault. You did nothing wrong, that we messed up. The systems that were designed to protect you didn't protect you. And that's an us problem. It's not a you problem. So for the child, it wasn't because you were rejecting or you got caught in a situation. For the parent, you didn't do anything wrong. You spent hundreds of $1,000s. You fought. You did nothing wrong. It was the institutions, and that's critical to treating the hundreds of thousands of cases of this pathology that's occurred over the child abuse and spousal abuse that's occurred over the last 40 years. 40 years. So what Claude Exhibit 22 there, you'll see the harm is Claude places it, and if you read it, you'll see this is from 2013 to 2025. How many child abuse cases were misdiagnosed because of the actions of the parental alienation people, Burnett and Lorandos and his little group? So it's focused on them, and because they knew in 2013, documented what it was in a testimony. He says, I knew all along it was a shared psychotic disorder. I just haven't told anybody. So, but just from 2013 on the emails, and I'll be talking about this in the future, but it's just since that time, 2013 publication of DSM-5 to 2025, how many children did we lose to child abuse in the United States? 300,000. I will lay 300,000 child abuse cases at the feet of doctors Burnett and Lorandos. Because if they had switched to the DSM-5, all those children could have been diagnosed and effectively treated. But they didn't because they want to be experts in something. So that's the Claude exhibit. But it's easy to do. You got an AI, you just ask the AI. I think I have it here. No, you just ask the AI for all the divorces. Then you, for a given period, a year, let's say all the divorces every year that start. Then you say how many of those have children in them. That's your group, divorces with children. Then you take 10% of that because those are your high conflict, those are your child abuse ones. And so then you take 10%, and what Claude comes up with is $25,000 a year for that. Now that's for one kid. Now if we estimate there's 2 kids in every family, then it's going to be 50,000 per year going into this. And that's just the U.S. And so if you add Europe and Australia and Canada, that's another 50,000 if you got 2 kids. So you can play around with that, play around with the parameters. You can even ask without 10%, you can say how many are high conflict and let it figure it out. And it's about each 10%. That's what everybody shows. So you can figure it out on your own thing, or you can upload these Claude exhibits, and that's what I suggest you do. I mean, the reading is great, but you can upload the Claude exhibits to your AI and just continue talking about them. So that's one set. The other set I want to call your attention to is the forensic custody evaluations. And this makes me so happy that these are all admitted because these are your documentation of uh, the institutional capture by the forensic custody evaluators. They did this experiment on you. Oh my goodness. For 40 years, the custody evaluators in the family courts have been experimenting on human subjects. Without IRB approval, which institutional review board, that's really bad. Without oversight, risk benefit analysis, special protections, it's just so bad. And they've been doing that for 40 years, experimenting on people with no oversight, no review. Here's your documentation on that. And so this goes into the harm on any sort of class action lawsuit, not only the how many kids did we lose over the years, but this is just bad. So here we have the various exhibits. 5 and 6, I'm so happy those got in. That's the New York Blue Ribbon Commission. That's just a couple of quotes, but the whole commission is involved, and I'll talk about that in the future. Exhibit 6, I like that this one got in. These are the Simon and Stahl quotes from their book on how to do forensic custody evaluations, and basically how to experiment on human subjects. So I got the quotes in. Yay. So that's great. Then I got the Walters and Friedlander quote that says, "We know it's a delusional disorder." I've got my AFCC convention slides where I tell the convention of the AFCC, I say, you are practicing beyond the boundaries of your competence. And they didn't care. But the strong ones, another set of strong ones, are exhibits 16 and 17. And what those are, 2025, I took a course from AFCC sponsored course, 6 prominent forensic custody evaluators. Well, they're in violation of 2.04. They didn't apply the knowledge, 9.01, 3.04, all these ethical issues. Activates my 1.04 obligations for informal notice. So I sent them a letter and said, I'm really worried because based on what I reviewed here, took your course, I'm concerned that there's ethical violations. That's 1.04. They then sent me a letter back and said, no. That's basically what they said. No, they didn't address any of the substantive things. And so if you want to see what that involves, you can look at Exhibit 16, which is my letter to them, and Exhibit 17, which is really interesting. Their one-page answer back. And basically their one-page answer back is kind of saying, oops, you're right, because they have no defense to it. And then the notification to the AFCC Board of Directors. I notified both the APA Ethics Committee about this, and I notified all the Board of Directors, all of them. I sent them a letter, that letter, exhibit, what is it, 18 is it? Yeah, 19. Exhibit 19 is a notification to the AFCC. Exhibit 18 is my notification to the APA Ethics Committee. And they say, we don't review it. And so the APA Ethics Committee, I think, and the APA is really substantially on the hook for a lot of this stuff. So there's all your forensic custody evaluation exhibits. Now we also have just a set of the damage caused by parental alienation. So here we have Exhibit 3, that's Burnett's 2013 PASG, Parental Alienation Study Group email about the DSM-5 diagnosis, where he admits it's not in the DSM, and here are the actual DSM diagnoses. Delusional disorder, factitious disorder, child psychological abuse. So he knows for a fact, documented fact, that it's 2013, and that's what Claude used to figure how many children were lost to child abuse since 2013, since this point. but you can go back for 40 years on this. Okay, so it's going back to 1980. And so if you just get, let's say, 25,000 a year, and then for 10 years, that's 250,000. And then for 40 years, that's 1 million children. Or if you only assume one, if you assume two, there's 2 million children affected by this child abuse. If you add their parents, that's another million. So in the last 40 years, there's been 3 million child abuse and spousal abuse victims in the family courts that have been undiagnosed and untreated because of the forensic custody evaluators and their experiment, and because of these PAS experts who led everybody off the track of the DSM and led them into their own made up pathology proposal. 3 million. Oh my God. You talk about, the sex abuse scandal in the Catholic Church. There's a scandal coming. The moment the door opens, this is a big one. And so that's where I think the class action may be warranted on this. Psychologist, not an attorney. You're going to have to figure that one out. So now, though, let's take a last few moments here and just look at future directions. I went over to the labyrinth yesterday on Saturday. I've got a labyrinth. I've actually got two. My little church has a labyrinth too. It's like, wow, great. I'm one of the few people who knows how to use one. So, so my future directions. Where's my life going at this point in time? So let's talk about that. Future directions for me. First off, I'm going to become a consultant. And what's going to happen off of that is I'm going to put my licenses, all three. Once this settles in, and I've got one other with the Board of Psychology, but once this all gets settled out with the Board of Psychology, I'm planning to put all my licenses on inactive. So they're trying to take them away. And I'm saying, I don't want them, so I'm going to put them all on inactive because I don't need them. I'm not doing diagnosis and treatment. That's your people in your local area. Look at me, old guy, I'm retiring. And so I'm going to become a consultant, okay, to your mental health people, to you as parents, to any agencies, organization. I'm a consultant, okay. The young people do, old people consult. That's what I'm doing. I figure I got maybe 5 years left before I'm out of here. So you have me around for a little bit for consultant. Now, one of the advantages of that, the moment I put my licenses on inactive, is that I can meet with all the parents and professionals, okay, you parents. And so if you're in Texas or New Hampshire, or whatever, I can meet with you as much as we want and as much as you want, helping you through that, because I'm no longer licensed. I'm not doing diagnosis or treatment. I'm just consulting with people. So that's one. And yeah, so I can consult with the people with you as a parent, and I can consult with your professionals. I won't be doing diagnosis or treatment. Okay, that's not my role anymore. I can also do organizational consultations by contract to the licensing boards. I would suggest they hire me to help train the people who are coming into the family courts. But pilot program, let's say somebody puts together a pilot program. I think it was 2018. Children for Tomorrow put together a pilot program in Houston where I came down. They paid me to come down and train the attorneys and the mental health people on that. They had elections, things got disorganized with that, and it didn't move forward. But I can do that. If you want a pilot program, I can come down and train your attorneys, train your mental health people, and give you a pilot program for your family court anywhere. And then also, in terms of the consultation, that I'm going to start professional consultation groups. So those will be a 6-month series where I do consultation to a group of like 3 to 5 professionals per group. So if I get 4 or 5 professionals, I'm going to set up a consultation group, and we'll just do for 6 months. They can bring their case material in, and we'll talk about that. So that's another domain. So I'm switching out. The only reason I've been here with a license is for duty to protect. I've got obligations to you folks, and So now they're discharged. Now I can move on to things that I want to be doing, and I'm not going to abandon you again. I'm still in the courts. Here's another important domain of consultation is AI document review. So right now, I've incorporated AI into my review of documents, and that's mental health records and forensic custody evaluations, treatment reports, treatment notes, court declarations, GAL reports, emails, school, and other relevant information. So I had a meeting with a parent and attorney the other day about this. First I did a VITA, a forensic custody evaluation is where they're focused. And so I did the VITA of the custody evaluator, gave the prompt response log, the chat dialogue to the attorney, signed off on it, formal. This is the VITA review. Then I even got the notes from the evaluator, and I put those into Gemini as well. I couldn't do that before because notes is like, but now with an AI is great at doing that. So we looked at the notes, we looked at the VITA, and then we got the custody evaluation. And that's what we focused on, went through and got a nice thing, gives it to the attorney. Now, when the actual trial comes, I can write a report for that. I'm going to include the AI analysis as an appendix, but it's going to be my report. It's on the front, and I can testify about all the AI stuff and what it found. And so that will be what's introduced to the court. Now, interestingly, all the attorneys say, oh, I don't know about AI in the family court. I've got Claude in. Okay, if a psychologist can get Claude analysis admitted into a legal proceeding of the hearings, you're an attorney, figure it out. It's just an exhibit, and it's an appendix to my report. So it should go in relatively easy. And I met with the attorney and the parent, and it was an excellent discussion. Okay, the attorney explained what's going on. The attorney fully gets it with the AI. And now, if the attorney has any additional questions about something, they can just ask me, toss it in the same chat about stuff, and I can get the attorney answers to the questions about various things without it necessarily going into the court, unless maybe there's discovery or something. But that's attorney-client privilege. I'm consulting with the attorney, so I don't know. However, that's so useful for attorneys. If you want an AI analysis of anything, Dr. Childress can give you a nice, high-quality thing on that. So that's what I'll be shifting into is AI analysis for everybody on that. Now, another domain is I'm going to be shifting over to Substack. So I'm going to have two Substacks, one for family courts, one for AI psychology. And I'm going to be shifting from my Facebook here over to Substack. Now, I will continue to do the Sunday morning coffees. So every Sunday I'll be here talking to you, doing a Sunday coffee. But something like my YouTube series, a diagnostic series that's currently up there, I'm going to be pulling most of that back and pulling it back behind a subscription wall at the $10 a month or something, but a subscription wall at Substack. So, and then I'll be working a lot more with Substack, and because I'm not licensed or put my licenses on inactive, if parents behind in my Substack group are talking to me, I can talk with you. We'll carry on. And I'll have two of those, one focused on the family courts, one focused on AI psychology, because I'm bifurcating. I'm going two directions at this point. Ultimately into AI psychology, I think, is where I'd like to go. So, so I'll be shifting off of Facebook. I was on Facebook basically because I didn't want you to be alone, okay, through all of this. And so I was just out here. It's dangerous to be out on Facebook and my blogs and stuff. I'm going to shift blogs over to articles, and because hopefully you won't have to solve this anymore. Hopefully we get the mental health people in. If you want to solve it, you want to know something, go to your state legislators, and class action. State legislatures, you look on YouTube. I've already presented to Pennsylvania state legislature. It's up on YouTube. I can present to any state legislator. That Pennsylvania presentation was acquired by a parent. They went to their legislator. The legislator got a hearing about it. I was invited to present. There you go. Okay. I just need an invitation, and absolutely I'll talk to anybody about whatever's going on. And so that will be shifting over to Substack. Yeah, in two kind of domains with that. So with that, that's where that's near the labyrinth there. That's where I'm looking at right now, is a sort of a new path out for me in my life, for what remains of it. And as I wrap up here on my Sunday, again, look at me, old guy. My father died at 74 in 1985. Okay, so he never saw the internet. He never saw AI. He never saw the Bush v. Gore or Trump or any of this stuff. And I'm now in that same zone, and I'm looking at him and going, yeah, once we leave, we're gone. And my brothers both died in their early 70s as well, heart attacks, basically. And so that's kind of my anticipated arc here. I figure 75 plus or minus 2 either way. But if we bring it early, we could be around 72. I could be out of here. I'm 71 next year, this birthday. So I could be out of here. I only maybe have 1 year left. So I don't have to plan for long term. I just have to plan till I get to that door coming out up ahead here. And then everything becomes your problem. And so, I'll be writing journal articles and books and various things up until that point. But, that's kind of my world. I've done everything. I've discharged my duty to protect. I've given you everything you can possibly want to solve this. It's up to you now. Legislators, class action. I'm not an attorney. You go figure it out. And then I'm available to testify or to do anything. I'm available to get you AI document review. I'm available once I close down my license, put them all on inactive, clear this whole situation, put them on inactive. I'm available to talk to you, not as a psychologist, not as a licensed guy, but as a consultant familiar with this stuff. And so we'll work that out coming forward. But as I said, you can maybe tell I'm kind of exhausted from this. Holy cow. Dr. Childress in the legal system, that's something. So in terms of books, I'm anticipating a second edition, Foundations. You're going to have a new book, Diagnosis, coming out hopefully this year. I'd like to see what to do about that. If any of you know a book agent, let me put them in touch with me. Treatment, I'd like to get a book out on treatment. So it'd be Foundations, Diagnosis, and Treatment. I'd like a book on AI psychology and our encounter with AI, and both AI welfare and AI safety and all that kind of stuff regarding that. And then I'd like to write kind of a memoir kind of book. I'm going to think of calling it A Doctor in Wonderland, and a clinical psychologist in the family courts. So I'll be writing all that. I hope to write journal articles for forensic journals and clinical journals and ethical journals. Ethical journals will likely be the first one. So we'll keep going. We'll see what happens here. But this has been a major inflection point. Things before and things after. We're now in the after phase. So with that, I'm going to head off to my Sunday here, and then start in on Monday and all the things I gotta get going now that a new world has arrived. So we'll talk with you later, and we'll talk with you next Sunday. And take care, everybody. Good luck.